Hello, my name is Kathleen Krauth, and I'm a high school social studies teacher at the American School in Japan, in Tokyo, where I've been teaching for 16 years. Before that time, I worked at teaching East Asia at the University of Colorado, and I've continued to work very happily with TEA on a number of programs and projects. This class app is one of a series on contemporary issues in Japan as part of the TEA project, Japan's Olympic Opportunity, funded by the U.S.-Japan Foundation, with additional funding from the Freeman Foundation to NCTA. I sincerely hope that you may find something useful within this class app presentation to engage your students in the study of contemporary Japan. Today, I'm going to discuss with you the National Stadium as case study of the 2020 Tokyo Olympics and national identity, which hopefully contextualizes some current events within the idea of sports and nationalism. On September 7th, 2013, the Olympic Committee awarded Tokyo the 2020 Olympics over the cities of Istanbul and Madrid. Most of Tokyo and Japan celebrated over this award, especially in light of the triple disasters of the earthquake and tsunami of 2011 and the ongoing Fukushima nuclear disaster. Tokyo has previously hosted the Olympics in 1964. These Olympics were hugely successful, with some claiming that they were the most successful of all modern Olympics. Most symbolic of this success and the rebirth of Japan in light of World War II was the Olympic Stadium. As you can see on this slide, this is the national stadium designed for the Olympics by Japanese architect Kengo Kuma. The stadium was modern, but also Japanese, very futuristic and very optimistic. However, because it was a symbol of the 1964 Olympics and the success of those Olympics, the Tokyo Olympic Committee and the Japan Sports Council decided it needed a new stadium for the 2020 Olympics. The National Sports Council, which is owner of the National Stadium, decided it wanted a new stadium for a new Olympics and a new century. Some of the criteria it set up for the stadium, the new stadium for the 2020 Olympics, were that it needed to be adjustable seating for up to 80,000 people, increasing the seating from the previous stadium, a retractable roof so that it could be used for other events. This new stadium for the 2020 Olympics also needed to be environmentally efficient. It needed to consider the surrounding landscape and ease of traffic and transportation. It also needed to be ready by April 2019, when Tokyo and Japan is hosting the Rugby World Cup. Also, there were some other criteria for these stadiums. The architect needed to be a Pritzker Prize winner, which is the biggest architectural prize, and the architect needed to have already designed a sports stadium, which limited the number of competitors within the stadium competition. But the architect also had to think about what this new century was going to be and what Japan's place would be in that new century. Because of Tonga's stadium and the success importance of that stadium, this stadium for the 2020 Olympics would also be seen as a statement of what Japan wanted to portray itself as a nation and people in 2020. The architect Zaha Hadid met all of these criteria, and as you can see in this slide, she was awarded the task of building Tokyo's 2020 Olympic Stadium. And here is her original design. Tadao Ando, who is a very prominent Japanese architect and head of the committee that chose Hadid's design, stated the following that it was as you can see on this slide, a dynamic and futuristic design embodying the message that Japan would like to convey to the rest of the world. Ando also, as shown here with Zaha Hadid, also expressed this, quote, "I believe the stadium will become a shrine for world sport for the next 100 years, as quoted in the Telegraph." Ando also said this stadium was a symbol of hope. The next slide shows the Iraqi-born London-based architect Zaha Hadid. She's the first Iraqi-born woman to win the very, very prestigious Pritzker Prize. It was incredibly surprising to me personally when she won this stadium bid because number one, she's a woman, and number two, she's not Japanese. She's a very, very highly regarded international architect, and she's known for her fluid, round, monumental structures. One of the reasons that the awarding of the National Stadium to Zaha Hadid was surprising to many people was that Japanese architects are very, very well renowned around the world. As I've stated before, the major architectural prize is the Pritzker Prize, and there have been quite a few Japanese winners in the last 20 years. So in my evaluation and analysis, the awarding of the 2020 Tokyo Olympic Stadium to Zaha Hadid was a real message about how the Tokyo Olympic Committee and the Japan Sports Council wanted to portray Japan as a more global, outward-reaching, risk-taking, and inclusive society. And it sent a message about what those Olympics were going to be like and how Japan really wanted to portray itself for those 2020 Olympics. However, almost immediately there were criticisms of the design, of the cost, of everything about the stadium. Fumihiko Maki, a very famous Japanese architect, led the opposition to Hadid's stadium. He stated, quote, "not to dispute the choice of architect, but to reconsider the program, which is much too large," end quote. The stadium was criticized as aesthetically much like a bike helmet. It was said to be proportionally a mismatched, overpowering other buildings around that area. One of those buildings was actually designed by Maki. So Maki and a couple of other architects, famous Japanese architects, actually organized a symposium called Rethinking the New National Olympic Stadium in the Historical Context of Gaian, which is the area where the stadium will be built. This was in October 2014. They wanted to protest the size of the design in relation to the surroundings and in relation to the greenery, which was an issue with Meiji Shrine. Maki also stated, quote, "I'm just saying it is just ridiculous," end quote. There were further criticisms from a variety of people within Japan. 83-year-old architect Arata Isozaki stated that he thought this was a monumental mistake, a disgrace to future generations. This was in The Guardian. He stated, "It looks like a turtle waiting to sink so it can swim away," and the sight left me in despair. Another criticism came from Shinichi Nakazawa, who is a social commentator, and he stated, quote, "This is not about the stadium, but Japan's entire culture." Hadid's response was that they don't want a foreigner to build a national stadium in Japan. She also accused all of those architects who were criticizing her of colluding with authorities, Japanese authorities, to get the design dropped. She called them hypocrites because they also accepted bids overseas and no one complained about their acceptance of those bids. And in response to criticisms of the design, she stated, quote, "I don't make nice little buildings." But with the problems, with the cost, the scale, and the design, Hadid did change her original design and scaled it down. But the problem was the cost, which Hadid had mentioned in her initial bid that costs were going to go up. And the stadium cost went up to $2 billion. So for all of these reasons, Hadid radically scaled down her design and the cost. However, even with all of these drastic changes that Hadid made to her initial design, on July 17, 2015, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe called an end to Hadid's stadium. He reversed course, citing he had previously supported the stadium, but he cited costs and the design and the opposition to the stadium as reasons for his calling an end to the stadium being built. So, why did Prime Minister Abe call an end to Hadid Stadium, and what were the repercussions? Because there were very serious domestic and international repercussions. Some observers see that Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's ratings were at an all-time low in July of 2015. And one of the reasons were that people in Japan were getting very, very worried and nervous about a stadium costing them way too much money when there had been so many economic troubles, and Abenomics wasn't working. So many people see his ending of the Hadid Stadium as a political move for his own political future. However, the repercussions of that decision can't be understated, I think. And the reason is the International Rugby Association was very, very unhappy and incredibly concerned because that was the stadium to be used in 2019. Scrapping that stadium meant there was not going to be a stadium for the rugby, or that the stadium that the rugby wanted was not going to be available. Of course, Hadid was not happy. She had spent her design team had spent 2 years, and she had spent a longer time trying to redesign the stadium, and then to have it drop like that was incredibly humiliating, and she was quite angry. The International Olympic Committee expressed severe concern over the dropping of the stadium and the handling of the whole situation. This decision really damaged Japan's international reputation. It, by some accounts, really called into question Tokyo's ability to pull off all of the small and big logistics needed to go into a successful Olympic. So a new competition began on September 1st on 2015, and the competition capped the costs, and they were much lower than during the original competition. The seating was scaled back, but most importantly, the Tokyo Olympic Committee and the Japan Sports Council decided to do a design-build format, meaning that you needed to get a construction company who would agree to the time and the cost, and it combines the design and the construction. So those would go together in the bid for the Olympic Stadium. Hadid was unable to sign up a construction company within Japan for a bid for the new competition, and so she failed in any kind of rebidding of her original stadium. On a side note, and a very sad side note, amidst all this controversy, and it continues, on March 31st, 2016, Zaha Hadid actually died. She was 65 years old. Kengo Kuma, who's a very famous Japanese architect, on December 22nd, 2015, won the new bid for the Olympic Stadium. He he had a wooden lattice design, which you can see on the slide here. And the key factor in the jury of the Japan Sports Council was the Japanese-ness of this design. This is a very different approach to the stadium than the Hadid in terms of what you're conveying. Also, it was supposedly less costly, and it was expected to be completed not for the rugby competition, but for the 2020 Olympic Games. Also, as you can see, it's greenery rich, which had been a problem for the Hadid's design, supposedly. And the government decided it would pay half, and the height was less, and there were many factors that went into this decision. The Kengo Kuma design was initially praised for its cost, for its simplicity, for the use of wood, which is one of Kuma's kind of signature features, and for the subdued nature of that design. However, it was also very criticized on social media, and many people likened it to a hamburger. The awarding of the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Stadium to Kuma did not mean the end to problems. Hadid charged that the detailed layout and seating of the stadium were too similar to her design, and she charged plagiarism. Hadid's team had worked, as I said previously, for 2 years, Kuma's team only 14 weeks. So she said that the geometry of the stadium, the internal planning, some of the landscape design even, the access strategies, and other components were too close to her design. Also, the other big issue was that there was no cauldron as part of Kuma's design. The Japan, that came out, it was in the domestic and international press, and people were incredibly unhappy because it is part of the Olympic criteria, but it was not included in the Japan Sports Council criteria. Japan's Olympic minister, Endo, stated that organizers had not worked out where to put the cauldron, and it wasn't part of the initial design because it wasn't required. He said it'll work out, they'll work it out. However, the International Olympic Committee says the cauldron needs to be seen from the inside and the outside of the stadium. But with the amount of wood that Kuma has designated to be part of that lattice roof, if all of that wood is included, and the inside of the stadium to have a fire cauldron there would break all of Japan's fire codes. So there's still issues about planning and who's overseeing. And I want to also give you the context of the Olympic logo, which is also decided by the Japan Sports Council, because none of the stadium can be understood without understanding of the logo and the problems and controversies surrounding that as well. Here in the middle, you can see the logo for the bid for the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. And the logo depicts a wreath of cherry blossoms, as you can see there, and you probably know one of Japan's most celebrated flowers. And this depiction of the cherry blossoms was seen as, according to the committee chief, Masato Mizuno, the bid committee, it symbolizes a return. It is the idea of coming back again. The Olympic Games coming back to Tokyo, and Japan coming back from the Fukushima disaster. So a new logo was needed for the actual Olympics. And here it is unveiled. It's based around the letter T, and the red circle represents a beating heart. The black color represents diversity, as other colors, all colors join in black, excuse me. The circle is inclusive, including all peoples of the world, and accepting each other. So the problem with this, as you can see on this slide, is on the left is the logo for the 2020 Olympics, and on the right you can see Belgian theater design. Almost immediately after the unveiling, there were allegations of plagiarism, and you can see the similarities between the design on the left and the right. The designer of the Olympic logo said he did not plagiarize, but many people pointed out similarities with the logo of this Belgian theater. Even the Yomiuri newspaper described the scandal over the logo as a big blunder. And so, because of that, the logo for the 2020 Olympics was scrapped and a new competition was announced. An open competition with a very open committee, everybody was named, there was a little more transparency, and finally this harmonized checkered emblem, which was intended to represent different cultures, countries, and ways of thinking, was unveiled. And this right now is the Olympic logo for the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. It's intended to represent different cultures, countries, and ways of thinking, but also incorporated within this design are traditional Japanese colors, this indigo, and the checkered pattern, which became popular in the Edo period when the shogunate was based in Tokyo. So there was a much more kind of refined elegance that was emphasized in this logo, and a more traditional kind of Japaneseness, as it's also going with diversity and the world. But it doesn't end there. Just like Hadid stated, construction costs have skyrocketed, and even in Kengo Kuma's design, construction costs have gone up. The entire stadium and logo controversies and problems have displayed horrible no leadership, no talking between national and locals, out of control budgets or no budgets at all, scandals, and there's been a delay in the start of the construction of the stadium. There's all the ideas of efficiency and reliability, which were given to Tokyo as part of the Olympics, have shown to be problematic. And finally, on June 15th, 2016, the Tokyo governor Yoichi Masuzoi was forced to resign over expenses, including art bought on internet auctions, domestic and overseas trip. And the real problem here is he's the second mayor to resign after Tokyo was elected to host the games. So the real issue is who is going to lead the city into the games and onto the world stage in a very positive way. It's a real issue right now. So finally, I leave with you the opportunities, challenge, problems, and legacies of the 2020 Olympics and of Tokyo and Japan as it is on the world stage. From the 2020 Tokyo Olympic Committee, they stated that, quote, the Tokyo 1964 Games completely transformed Japan, enhanced Japanese people's awareness of the outside world, and helped bring about rapid growth of Japan's economy. The 2020 Games will enable Japan, now a mature economy, to promote future changes throughout the world and leave a positive legacy for future generations. However, what has happened in the case of the stadium is very special, says David B. Stewart, professor of architecture at Tokyo Institute of Technology, and he told the Japan Times this. He said there are several things that went wrong, and it's hard to know how they relate to one another. It's been an extraordinary mess. The Tokyo government, the Tokyo Olympic Committee, and the Japanese government have all revealed the same problems that have plagued politics and economics for the last 2 decades. However, now they are on the center stage because of the Olympics. It will take an extraordinary effort on the part of everyone to fix this extraordinary mess and portray Japan in a reliable, efficient, inclusive, and forward-thinking